the occasion of the publication of The Way of Psychonaut, but really it's on the occasion of his entire life's work. And if there's anybody that's responsible for the psychedelic renaissance in the world, it's Stan. Without Stan... So I was going to tell you two things that sort of are signals of this psychedelic renaissance, what's really happening. The first one that's rather astonishing to me is that in October, we had a presentation at a conference, and it was the International Association of Chiefs of Police. There was 10,000 police chiefs and police officers and police therapists from all over the world. This was in Orlando. And it turned out that at the exact time that our presentation, it was me, one of our therapists, one of the veterans that's been through our study, and our senior retired DEA official who's a consultant for us. We gave this presentation, and it turned out that this was such a sort of a right-wing Republican group that President Trump decided that he would speak there as well. And so he announced that he would speak there 2 days before the conference was to start, and they scheduled him at the exact same time that we were going to speak. And so we were a little bit disappointed, but when we get there, there's thousands and thousands of people in line to see President Trump. And we got to our hall, which could fit like 300, there was only about 25 people there. But as it turned out, one of the persons that was there stayed afterwards to talk to us, and he was a psychologist for the police. And he said that he wanted to go through our training in order to be a psychotherapist for other police officers with trauma. And so he did. He came to some of our early trainings, and then he had a meeting with me with his police chief and another police chief that's head of the Police Chiefs Union in Massachusetts. And after our conversation, he called me and he said that he'd gotten permission to go through the entire training program. And why that's so significant is the next step for him is to volunteer. We have a protocol where we give MDMA to therapists as part of their training. So we are now giving MDMA to police officers. So it's rather astonishing. The other thing that's just come about last week, really, and it marks this really long cycle. So in 2004, 15 years ago, is when we got permission for the first study in the United States for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. It was at the Medical University of South Carolina. It was with Michael Midhofer and his wife Annie Midhofer, who were going to be the therapists. Both of them and myself also have been in the training with the holotropic breathwork with Stan and Christina. And so we were super excited. It's taken us all these years to try to finally get permission for this first study in the US with MDMA for PTSD. And at the very last minute, the medical university sort of freaked out, and they told Michael, we're not going to let you do the study here. You can't do it here. And if you want to do it anywhere, you either have to give up the study or we're going to kick you out of your affiliation with the university. And so Michael said goodbye to the university, thankfully. And so we were able to start the study. And so what just happened last week is that Michael had a meeting with the president of the Medical University of South Carolina. And what it turns out is one of their major donors has decided that she wants to create a psychedelic research center of excellence at the Medical University of South Carolina. And she's endowed the business school at another college, and a billionaire woman who's been very much taken by the therapeutic potential of psychedelics. So we see in a lot of different ways, early on, people that have been unwilling or frightened to get involved who are now seeing the value of this. So it feels like we're about 2.5 years away from having all the data that we need and having the negotiations with FDA to make MDMA-assisted psychotherapy into a medicine for PTSD. And the method of therapy that we're using really came from the work that Stan has done with LSD. It's very similar. It's the same concepts, it's the things that you'll read about in the Way of the Psychonaut, but really our training, our traditions, our approaches all come from what we've learned from Stan. And about this faith in the inner healer, this faith that things emerge from consciousness in a certain kind of an order that we can't predict, but that people need to pay attention to that rather than follow a kind of a formalized script. So we're negotiating with FDA. We're also trying to move MDMA to Europe. We have one of our donors is very interested in bringing MDMA to China. So in our October training, we actually have 10 therapists coming from China. And we're getting contacted from people all over the world, including someone here I just spoke to a minute ago from Ukraine. And so really there's this global sense of this need for healing. And people are understanding how trauma is linked to so many other illnesses. But I think if it weren't really for the thread that Stan was willing to keep alive when so many people kind of abandoned psychedelics and went into other approaches, Stan really acknowledged that there were all these other approaches, and we do need to learn and work with them, and they're really good with integrating, and they're really good with catalyzing, but at the same time, there's still a role for psychedelics. So when there was virtually nobody willing to keep saying that, Stan was the voice that said there's something here, and that we need to really look at it and bring it back. And so I just want to acknowledge, Stan, how much of a privilege it's been for me to get to know you and to spend time and be inspired by you. I was kind of a lost college student. I'd taken a whole bunch of LSD and mescaline. I had the delusion that the more drugs you take, the faster you evolve. I don't know how many of you have had a similar delusion, but it unfortunately did not turn out to be that way. And so in my confusion, I went to the guidance counselor at my college. And the guidance counselor, this is 1972, and the guidance counselor said, it's legitimate what you're trying to do. He gave me this string to wear around my finger so that never, when I was spaced out, I should just look at this string and be grounded. But then, more importantly, he gave me Realms of the Human Unconscious to read. And so I'll talk more about it later, but that's what turned everything around for me, and that's where at 18 I devoted myself to bringing back psychedelics and going through psychedelic therapy. And it's all really because of what I read in the book that Stan had written. And so now for us to be able to work with Stan on the Way of the Psychonaut all these years later is just a real special pleasure and an honor.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to also acknowledge Brigitte, who's here, who's Stan's wife, who's helping in so many different ways what we're doing, and also Paul, Stan's brother. And there's one coincidence I'll just tell you that's incredible. So MDMA was moved to be criminalized by the DEA in 1984. And so that's where we started our lawsuits against the DEA to try to keep MDMA legal. And we started winning in the courts. We had really good witnesses. We prepared a lot ahead of time, and we were winning in the court of public opinion. We had rabbis and monks who were talking about MDMA and how it was useful to them in the Washington Post and in the Newsweek. And things were going really, really well. We were starting to think maybe we could really protect therapeutic use of MDMA. And then we became aware that out of sort of a devious strategy of the DEA, that while we were sort of slowing them down in the United States, they went to the WHO to try to criminalize MDMA internationally. And we're part of the international treaty, so that if they would have done it internationally, criminalized them, the US would have followed suit. And so I'd have this relationship built up with the Assistant Secretary General of the UN, who was very mystical, the mystic for the UN. And I said we need help to sort of bring information to this group at the United Nations, at the World Health Organization. And as it turned out, they have an expert committee that advises the World Health Organization group about what to do about different drugs. And in some phenomenal synchronicity, Paul was the president, the chairman of that committee. And the entire committee voted to criminalize MDMA except for one person, which was Paul. And he got a footnote in the official UN document that was eventually it was super important. The footnote said that they voted unanimously except for the chairman who voted against it, that he was saying that this criminalization would block research for a long time, and that the committee encouraged the nations of the world to facilitate research into this most interesting substance. And that was later used several years after that by some group of Swiss psychiatrists to get permission from 1988 to 1992 to work with LSD and MDMA. And that was really because of this little footnote that Paul had arranged to be in the statement. And so that tragically ended in 1992 when one of the Swiss psychiatrists went to lead a group, I think it was in Austria, and they administered ibogaine among many different drugs to a group therapy session, and the person died from the ibogaine. So that stopped what he started. But it just goes to show that little things, little defeats that you think are defeats actually sometimes have the seeds of future growth. And so I just want to acknowledge Paul for that. That was just so incredible. And to think that so I think I've heard the bell several times. So I'm gonna, we're trying to do research, of course, and we need help. So Liana Galuli, who's part of our development team, has a few words for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rick. Everybody, Rick Doblin.